Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. My name is Avery Bazell. I'm the managing director at the Center for Third World Organizing. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. You may have came to this workshop today thinking about, I'm going to be talking about rapping, and maybe I was going to help you with your flow so that you could have this great movement album. But sorry, that's not the rap that we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about the actual organizing rap, which is a conversation on how to bring folks in. Maybe you've seen somebody that's knocked on your door lately. It could have been for political reasons, for a candidate. It could be talking about something that's been happening inside your community. And maybe you've seen it as a kid and your mama said, don't open the door, right? Or maybe you've been motivated in the past couple of months because of the change that's happened inside of your community. And you want to talk to your neighbors about it. There might be this action you want people to come to. There might be this meeting that you want people to come to. And you're figuring out, wow, how does that person have that conversation so well? Well, there's a skill and there's a science behind it. And we're going to be talking about it today. So I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint that's just going to briefly go over what a rap is. So what is this rap that I'm talking about? An organizing rap is a framework for having an organizing conversation. And in order to be a successful organizer, you got to be familiar with this basic rap structure that I'm going to go through today. Because a good rap should summarize the important information necessary for the person at the door or on the street or wherever you may be doing outreach at to understand the issue. It should provide a ladder of levels of agreement on an issue to make sure that folks are really in alignment with where you're going. And it should motivate the person to take action at the end of the day on an issue. So that is what an organizing rap is. And today we're going to go through some steps to a rap. I'm going to go through 7 different steps that you could use as a framework and tailor towards your own. So when you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, this is how you do it. So 1, we have an opening or an introduction, right? So you're going to introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Avery. I'm with this org. And you're going to talk about why you're there today, right? So you may be talking about policing. You may be talking about gentrification, whatever that may be. You want to talk about that and say, like, could you have a conversation, just a few minutes of your time to talk with them today? After you've introduced yourself, then the next thing we have is establishing a rapport or a connection. So the first thing I have here is break the ice, right? Because you want people to be comfortable. You might be a stranger to them. So how do you do that? You may see that they have a beautiful garden inside of their yard, right? They have flowers or something like that. Maybe you talk about that. Maybe you're in a town or in a city that is big on sports and they may have the sports signs up inside of the yard. But that's a way that you can break the ice. It's finding something that you can really connect with. That's not particularly maybe about the issue that you're talking about, but it shows the human side, right? And then after that, how do we establish a rapport? We got to get the story, right? We need to ask some good questions. Particularly, we want to ask open-ended questions that we get people to start talking, right? Really questions that begin with who, what, when, where, and why are the best questions to really get people talking. Some good questions that you can ask is maybe, how long have you lived or worked here in this community? How have things gotten better or how have things gotten worse since they've been there? If you could change one thing about your community, what would it be? And another question here is like, do you think the police keep Black people safe? All of these are questions just to get you started, but you have to figure out your own questions to actually move forward and get people to get the story and establish a rapport and connection. And after you've done that, the next thing we have is agitate, right? We've gotten the story, we've gotten people to talk a little bit, and now we're starting to identify the issues. And hopefully they're the issues that you're actually motivated and want to talk to them about. So after we identify those issues, seeing if it's connected with the issues of the organization or the reason why you're there, once you have that, you want to challenge them a little bit. And agitation is kind of like making people upset, right? That's the definition of it. But you want to challenge the thinking that dominates, that the dominant narrative prescribes, right? Who makes the decisions about your job or about that thing that's going on in your community. Is that actually fair? Do police actually stop crime inside of our community? Why do we need the police to have militarized weapons? When white folks are rioting over sports, do they get the same response from the police? These are questions that we can be asking folks to really get folks to thinking, right? And really turn the light bulb on for folks to be like, why is it that way, right? And really get people excited and agitated about the issue, that they actually want to do something about it, right? But what we're clear on is that people just don't move on agitation alone, right? We actually have to build a vision, right? And we need to allow for space for people to vision what is possible if we fight for what we want. What is possible if we give folks the chance to see the alternative? Because we often talk about what's wrong, but we need folks to see, like, what am I actually fighting for? And people to vision, what are we actually fighting for? What would it look like to have real safety inside of our communities? What would it look like if people were able to get that park inside of their community? Whatever that may be, folks need to vision what is the alternative. And once I get that change, once I get to that win, what would that mean if we got that win? So focusing not just on the fight, but also what happens, what happens when we get that fight. So people can also dream and see how that feels. And once folks have done that, then we have inoculation, right? This is giving people a dose of some of the pushback that will happen, right? We often know when we're talking about vaccinations that they give a dose of something that helps fight what may be happening, right? And we have to do that inside of our organizing too, when we have our RAP, right? We need to discuss the potential risk and opposition that is going to occur. And when we're doing that, we also have to make sure we don't make any promises you can't keep, right? So if you come into this action, this mobilization, there's a chance that you may get arrested, right? By partaking inside of an action, right? We need to be able to tell people about those risks, right? I'm somebody that organized in the labor movement for years, right? So a part of my RAP and my inoculation was telling people about what happens when we start to be talking about jobs and like fighting against our company and our boss, right? And what they may say. So it's inoculation is just giving people what is, some risk, what could be happening. Therefore, when they do happen, people are actually aware of what they're stepping into when they step into action. And then after that, we have the commitment, right? So we've had this great conversation with our folks, right? The person on the door, and everybody's excited. And what do we want to do? Well, when you come in, you got to make sure that you have an ask, right? We're just not shooting the talk to be shooting the talk. But actually, we want to get folks to have a commitment. So we need to make a clear ask. And the way we do that is, will you come to this meeting? Will you come to this action? Will you sign this petition? All of those different things are the asks, right? It's the call to action in a way. And once we make that clear ask, we want to wait for a response, right? We don't want to rush into it and assume because we know what they say, assumptions make it of yourself. Yeah. So we're going to make a clear ask, and we want that person to say yes, and let their yes be their yes, let their no be their no. And also, if there's a maybe, probably we need to go back a little bit inside of some of these steps that we have to try and come back down and ask again, right? So maybe we want to explore why they're saying maybe, right? And come back to those steps and then make the ask again, right? So will you come to this action? Will you sign this petition and things like that to try and get a yes or a no, right? And once we've done that, we want to follow up with folks. So we clearly want to thank them for their time. Thank you for talking with us today. Thank you for signing this petition. Thank you for agreeing to come to this meeting, whatever that may be. And then we need to talk about the expected follow-up procedure that happens after that, right? And when we are talking to folks on the ground, we often say, as a rule of thumb, we need to follow up with folks 48 to 72 hours after we've talked to them. Why? Because y'all, so much happens in between that time. And after that, you call me a week later, I may not remember that conversation that we just had, right? So when we're doing that, we need to just make sure that we are following up with folks and saying like, hey, I'm going to call you today, Saturday, right? Which means that I need to call that person by Monday, right? And saying, I'm going to call you Monday, maybe at this time, just to remind you or pick you up, whatever that may be. We just need to explain that procedure. So those are the steps that happen. We have, once again, we have the opening and the introduction. Followed by that, we need to establish a rapport or a connection. So we get the story. Once we do that, we have the agitation. Followed by that, we build the vision, right? Because we don't move on agitation alone. We also need the vision. They're paired together. We want to do inoculation. Then we want to ask for our commitment and then follow up. And those are the 7 steps. It's pretty simple on how to have an organizing conversation. That's your wrap. That's your flow. And you get those 7 steps and you make it your own, right? So oftentimes we get a script inside of organizing that says, oh, say this or say that. But actually, we have to make it our own because I'm Avery. So I got to say the things the way that Avery would say it. And you have to say it the way that you would say it. So these are just the basic steps that will help folks develop the framework on how to have a conversation, because there's many issues that's going on out there. And there's issues particular to your community. So you have to make sure that you use that. But these 7 steps are the framework to help folks really get a wrap down, what they should be including, how they should have the conversation. You've probably seen it happen when you've had conversations with folks on the doors, right? When people have talked to you, they use some of these, give or take, right? Folks might not always use inoculation depending on what they're asking for. They may not have to agitate on the issue, but you may see the opening and introduction, right? On introducing yourself, they might ask you some questions and establish a rapport to get the story. Clearly, they got to make an ask of you once they've had that conversation. And of course, they're going to thank you. But depending on the gravity of the situation and the conversation, those are the 7 steps that help people have a conversation. So with that, that's a wrap. That's how you develop a wrap. So I look forward to you all talking to folks and talking to folks in your community on how to create the change that you want to see inside of your communities. If you need more resources, you can go to the Center for Third World Organizing. We often have trainings that go a little deeper into this. Also, folks can go, we developed an old game back in the day that can really help folks out. It's organizinggame.org. It's very old, so I just want to say that in advance, but you'll get to see some of the conversations and it'll help you on how to develop a wrap and see how folks typically knock on doors and give you some practice. But also you can always reach out to me. My email is Avery, Avery, spelled like my name, at ctwo.org. And I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have as you're out there trying to develop a wrap. Good luck. Thanks for coming.